Nothing hinders progress faster than knowing what to do and not doing it consistently. See, that's what a lot of us struggle with. We assume we need more discipline, but in reality, that's usually not the real problem. The real problem is that we set standards that are not designed to survive real life. We don't consider the busy days, the stressful days, the days when we'll have competing priorities, and we set standards that aren't meant for those specific days. So when they happen, our standards don't hold in place. See, when motivation doesn't show up, when we have intentions but the clarity fades away and there's nothing to hold the line, our standards collapse. So this is what today is about. This is week 1 of the alignment series, where we discuss everything reset and identity. On day 1, we talked about the silent killers of success. On day 2, we did a short self-examination to see where we stand with identity, standards, and decision making. We talked about what we tolerate, and we talked about sustainability, remembering what didn't die, and remembering what our wins are, because those are the things that set us up for alignment. Now, today is day 3. And day 3, we're talking about everything standards. We're talking about how we hold standards, how we set them so that we can raise them, right? Yes. So here's the question for today. How do you intentionally set standards that hold when motivation disappears? Because the thing about standards is they have to hold, and they don't hold by themselves. Standards don't stay in place because we know them, or have them, or claim them. They stay in place when they're backed by discipline and character. Now, the person who inspired me to make this video is none other than Jim Rohn. There's a video he made with a title that intrigued me, and that title in itself is a framework for standards. So Jim Rohn says, think big, start small, and act like the person you want to become. Now, we all know that Jim Rohn is a motivational speaker. However, that statement doesn't sound like motivational language only. It's a framework for standards, and I'll show you why. He says, think big, start small, and act like the person you want to become. When we look at thinking big, it takes us back to identity. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So thinking big actually relates to deciding who you're going to become. Now, when we look at act small, it takes us back to decisions, decision making, and behavior. So that's basically defining and deciding on what the repeatable steps will be for the outcome you're looking to achieve. And then act like the person you want to become. He didn't say become the person you want to become. He didn't say think about the person you want to become. He said act like that person, meaning there's an awareness of not being there yet. There's an awareness of where you are, an awareness that you're not yet that person, but acting like it out of faith and belief that you're getting there. So that's basically walking in alignment before you see the results. I know, I say that a lot, but let that sink in. Let that sink in. So this is how standards move from intention to behavior, just the way Jim Rohn summarized it. Thinking big, starting small, and acting like who we want to become. Now, before we talk about setting standards, I think it's important for us to define what a standard actually is. So I went ahead and asked my friend Google, what is the definition of a standard? And the shortest and simplest definition I could find is that a standard is a level of quality or attainment. Google also says it is what you define to be acceptable or normal. These definitions actually support what we discussed yesterday. The fact that standards are not our ceiling, they are our floor. They're basically what you consider normal. So essentially, a standard is not what you hope to do. It is what is expected for you, by you. Real life, standards show up in different ways. It could be a boundary, a line that you choose not to cross, even when it's easier to do so. It could be a rule that you live by, not imposed, but decided. Or it could simply be what you tolerate, what you expect as normal in your habits, in your environment, in your time, and in your behavior. Now, a standard is different from a goal. A goal is what you want to achieve. A standard is what you choose not to live below. It's your normal. It's your base. A goal only requires to be accomplished, but a standard requires to be kept and held. A goal is an outcome, but a standard is who you become. It's basically you saying, this is who I am. This is how I operate. A standard is basically how you live consistently. Is how you operate consistently, no matter what your day brings. However, a goal is what you want to achieve. It's you saying, this is what I'm working towards. They give direction and targets. See, the key difference between a goal and a standard is that you can reach a goal without changing who you are. But a standard is who you become. A standard relates to your identity. So goals get you results, but standards keep the results. And with standards, behavior becomes automatic. But they work together. Standards protect goals, and goals reveal weak standards. Without standards, goals rely on motivation and intention. So the bottom line is, if it's optional, it's a goal. If it's non-negotiable, it's a standard. Now, we talked about discipline and character. So what role does discipline play in this relationship between standards and goals? Well, discipline acts like a protector. It basically protects your standard. So if there's nothing, or if your standard isn't clear, then discipline has nothing to protect. So your standard is a decision you've made in advance of a situation taking place. It's you defining and deciding that whatever situation comes my way, this is how I will react to it. So discipline comes and honors your standard even when it's inconvenient. Basically consistency under ordinary conditions. It comes and protects standards and closes the gap between what you feel like doing and what you decided to do. That gap. So discipline comes and acts as a protector and enforcer of standards. If standard is what you decide to do, whether it's convenient or not, then discipline is what honors your standard when it's inconvenient, and character is what honors your standard when no one is watching. Without discipline, standards become preferences, commitments become suggestions, and your goals become optional. So that's why we need discipline to keep our standards in place. Character comes as the root of standards. If discipline protects standards, then character anchors standards in the ground. It keeps standards rooted. It's deeper than behavior. Basically, character is who you believe you are when no one is enforcing any rules. It's who you believe you are in silence. When there's no consequences to your actions, who will you choose to be? That's character. So strong character makes standards non-negotiable. It's basically rooting your standards. You can't detach a flower from its roots. So you can't detach your standards from your character. They go hand in hand. Your standards are rooted by your character. And when your character is strong, your standards become non-negotiable. If your character is weak, your standards become situational. You have strong character. It doesn't depend because you've already decided how you're going to react. You've already decided what the outcome should be, what your decision should be based on your standards. Your standards have already established what you've decided about a situation before it even happens. And your character anchors that decision so that it's rooted and not easily yanked out. And then discipline protects that decision. You see the relationship? So you don't rise to your goals. You fall to the level of your character. Because if your character is the root, then it's the last layer. There's nothing after that. Well, there's soil. Anyways, we don't want to get too technical. But if your character is your roots, if your character is what your standards are rooted, anchored in, then you fall to the level of your character. See, goals are directional. Standards are behavioral. Goals tell you where you want to go. Your standards tell you how you want to show up there. So that's why people are able to achieve goals, but their standards never change. They stay the same because you don't have to become something else to achieve a goal. All you have to do is do what it takes to reach the destination. But how you show up on your way there is defined by your standards. Make sense? All right, so think of it this way. Goals define what you want. Standards define what you accept. Discipline sustains standards on a daily. Character sustains standards long term. That's the relationship between the four. Discipline is what handles the daily resistance. Character is what handles the slow erosion. They all work hand in hand to allow you to become who you want to become. So your goals are meant to motivate action. Your standards are meant to handle your behavior. Discipline executes. Character preserves. That's the relationship between them. They all work together. One without the other leads to failure, and they all work together to make standards durable, to hold them in place and sustain them. So now that we're clear on how goals, standards, discipline, and character work together to help you hold and sustain your standards, we can now talk about how to set standards intentionally. So there are 4 steps. The first one is to anchor standards in identity. We always go back to identity because this whole exercise is about becoming. It's not about reaching goals. Goals mean nothing if you're not becoming more of who you want to become. At the end of the day, your goals will be achieved. You will reach those goals. However, who you become by reaching those goals is what stays, is what remains. So that's why we go back to identity. So identity gives standards meaning. That's why it needs to be anchored in standards. So that's step 1. Now step 2 is to define the standard as a minimum, not as a wish. It's your minimum. It's your floor. It's something measurable, something that you can live by every day. Don't set your standards so high that you actually can't hold them. Set your standards as your minimum, and then gradually and progressively raise the bar higher. But start with your minimum. What is your standard on a daily basis, no matter what happens, no matter what the weather looks like, whether it rains or shines? The standard stays the same. It is not situational. It is non-negotiable. It's a standard. It is set. And it's a minimum. So step 2 is setting your standard as a minimum. Now step 3 is to start small. Remember, Jim Rohn said to think big, but to start small. Start with what you can do. Start with what is doable on a daily basis. This is not supposed to be theoretical. These are standards that we should be able to keep and live by. Remember, it's our floor. It's what we live by. It's what we find normal, acceptable, basic. It's our basis. See, starting small is not lowering your standard. It's designing it to survive in real life. So we gotta make them small enough to repeat, clear enough to remember, and stable enough to keep. And in the words of BJ Fogg, behavior sticks when demand matches your ability. If a standard is too high, or if a standard is too heavy, it will collapse. And finally, step 4, protect standards with discipline and character. Standards is the decision you make before the situation is presented to you. Discipline is what keeps that decision, and character is what says this still holds when the decision is challenged. So this brings us to the end of day 3. We set standards intentionally by thinking big, starting small, and acting like the person we want to become. And we use discipline and character as anchors to hold those standards. I'll see you tomorrow for day 4.